America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Our special weaponized empathy. We planned to do this special on empathy, and then, like 4 days later, Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady, the former Secretary of State, the almost first woman to become President of the United States, wrote this article in The Atlantic, MAGA's War on Empathy. The crisis in Minneapolis reveals a deep moral rot at the heart of Trump's movement. The article is about one of the guests that we already booked on the show. How about that? Way ahead of you, Hillary. Now, this article is great, and I can't wait to go talk to Joe about it. Hillary says, that the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy reveals a deeper moral rot at the heart of Trump's MAGA movement. Whatever you think about immigration policy, how can a person of conscience justify the lack of compassion and empathy for the victims of Minnesota and for the families torn apart or hiding in fear, for the children separated from their parents or afraid to go to school, said Hillary. Now, to be clear, Hillary and everyone on the elite left, these people, the Renee Goods, the Alex Preddys, they're all just cannon fodder. This is an actor, remember him, Gus from Breaking Bad.
If the whole world showed up on Putin's doorstep or on the Iranians' doorstep or in Washington, it would stop. They'll kill 550 million, however, but the rest of us would survive with a new. This is time for a revolution. It's time for it.
She got you. The rest of us would survive. Do you think Hillary Clinton would be on the front lines of the revolution that they want? Pretty sure Hillary Clinton would survive it. Just like no one was happier that January 6th happened than Nancy Pelosi. She was giddy from start to finish. Same thing here. It's the Hillary Clintons on the left who love that people died in Minneapolis. They wanted this to happen so that they could stop Trump from enforcing federal immigration law, which we've articulated many times before on this show, is an existential threat to them and their power. The hypocrisy, we've gone over this all before. I'll do it real quick. The idea that the left, for 1 second, thinks they have the moral high ground over any of this is ridiculous. 550,000 children, unaccompanied children, came unaccompanied, not just kids with families, unaccompanied children came across the border under Joe Biden. Children dropped off in the desert. Children trafficked across with sex traffickers. Then either they dropped off in the desert or came into America, then be sex trafficked even more and abused. How many children killed by illegal aliens? No tears from Hillary. To hear this, pretend that these people have the moral high ground from the people who keep our kids in failing schools and told little boys and girls that they could change their gender by chopping off body parts. The party of abortion is claiming the moral high ground. Don't let them claim it for 1 second. One observer in Minneapolis was arrested by ICE for interfering in operations, right? And it turns out the person that she saved, and the guy got away, the illegal alien got away. The person that she saved was a wife beater, an illegal alien wife beater. Been convicted of it. I would love for the ex-wife, I'm hoping ex-wife of that illegal alien, could meet with his savior, his white savior who saved him from being deported. Right? I would love for the abused wife to confront the white woman in Minneapolis and explain to the observer the abuse that this illegal alien put her through. And have this ex-wife say, why would you protect him? I've been wanting this guy deported for years so he would stop stalking me and stop abusing me. And you protected him? Why did you do that? You protected him. Why? Because you think you're compassionate? You have empathy? How about some empathy for me? How about some empathy for all the women he's abused? We have compassion, they think. Yeah, your so-called compassion is very misguided. It lacks discernment and wisdom. It may have all the feels, but it lacks discernment and wisdom. We talked a bit about this in our last week's special. Remember I shared the story of women who see everyone as either baby, protector, or enemy. We don't have time to go through it all again here today, but what we're seeing right here out of the left, particularly out of women on the left, is toxic empathy. We're going to define this empathy word throughout the show today, but Allie Beth Stuckey wrote a book called Toxic Empathy, who also was in this Hillary Clinton article in The Atlantic as well. Toxic empathy is love, any love that, if you're listening on the podcast, those big air quotes, any love that encourages you to affirm sin, validate lies, or support destructive policies. So empathy is any so-called love that encourages you to affirm sin, validate lies, or support destructive policies. These are bad things. Sin, lies, destructive policies are bad. So anything that encourages you to do that is not good. Toxic empathy. A clear example of this from Allie Beth is imagine a person whom you feel empathy to. In their pain, if they're feeling all these horrible things. And Allie Beth says we can empathize with the pain of withdrawal for a drug addict. We can empathize with that. That's empathy. But it would be cruel to give them the heroin they crave. That would be toxic empathy. See the difference? Men and women are different. That's what it all boils down to. We've lived in a culture that for the last 20 plus years or so has been run by progressive women, the worldview of progressive women. Now conservative men are taking it back, and it's jarring for many people. But men and women are different. I see it every day in my life as a parent. Just the other day, my 9-year-old was feeling sick. He was at school feeling sick, and the nurse called. And my wife was like, I'm coming, my poor baby's sick. And I said, whoa. Can you just lay down for a while and drink some water and see if he feels better? You can go back to class. Right? I mean, there's about 50 examples of that every day in our home. And kids need a mom and a dad for this reason. Men and women are complementary to each other. That's good. But when it comes to our country, it is the conservative men's turn now. By the way, sidebar, if only men could vote, Trump would have won every single state in America. Trump won nationally among men 55-43. But I'll end with this. Don't think that if women were all in charge, it's just rainbows and sunshine. This is Helen Andrews. Helen Andrews is the person leading the way on how feminism has hurt society and how wokeness happened. And wokeness happened because progressive women took over. And it's really important to know this. It's really important to know how this happened so we make sure it doesn't happen again, first of all, and also so we can understand that we have a very different worldview that's now in charge. Here's Helen Andrews.
But if you want to put it in a single sentence, you could say that feminization equals wokeness. Everything you think of as wokeness is simply an epiphenomenon of demographic feminization. Think about all the things that wokeness means. Valuing empathy over rationality, safety over risk, conformity and cohesion over competition and hierarchy. All of these things are privileging the feminine over the masculine. So if you have ever wondered why wokeness appeared out of nowhere when it did, that is my hypothesis, that all of the institutions that began admitting women in the 1970s eventually got enough women that they were able to reorient them. For example, women are consistently less supportive of free speech than men in surveys asking which is more important, protecting free speech or preserving an inclusive society. Approximately 2/3 of men say free speech, and approximately 2/3 of women say inclusive society. In moral reasoning, the traditional way of phrasing the difference between men and women is to say that women have an ethics of caring and men have an ethics of justice. In making a moral judgment, men will ask, what are the rules and what are the facts? Women tend to be more interested in context and relationships. So let's apply that to wokeness. When James Damore wrote his famous, or I should say notorious memo for Google, arguing that female underrepresentation in the hard sciences might not be the result of bias and prejudice, no one even attempted to argue that he was wrong on the facts. The reason that he was fired was because the things he had written might make his female coworkers feel bad. Or consider the Kavanaugh hearings. The masculine position was to say that maybe something bad happened to you, but if you do not have evidence, then we can't allow you to ruin a man's life and career over it. The feminine position was to say, how can you talk about rules of evidence? Can't you see she's crying? Now, to be clear, many women were revolted by the way the Kavanaugh hearings played out. In fact, the very best book on the Kavanaugh hearings was written by two women, Molly Hemingway and Carrie Severino. But a political system in which men predominate will tend to operate according to rules of facts and objectivity, and one in which women predominate will tend to operate by the rules of emotions and subjective facts, even if there are individual men and women who fall on the opposite side of those camps.
It's Helen Andrews. There was a study done just recently by FIRE, the free speech organization, and it was about how tolerant men and women are of free speech. And the conclusion was, ready for this? Men are more tolerant, and Helen spoke of tolerance for free speech. Men are more tolerant of people on the opposite end of the political spectrum than women are of people even in their own political party. You with that? Women, they're so against freedom of speech, not because they're against freedom of speech, but because they're for cohesion, right? They want people to be together and united, which is a wonderful instinct. But the problem with that is if anyone dare say anything that hurts feelings in any way, you're a threat to that cohesion, right? Women are wired, and this is so good, to bring people together, the tribe, the family. We want cohesion here, people. And people who say things that mess up that unity are a threat and need to be silenced. So women are wired. Men aren't wired like that. To the point where when the male worldview ruled society, society was more tolerant. As the female psyche has taken over more of our society, we're actually a less tolerant society. And that's where we see toxic empathy come in. We don't need more empathy, certainly not more toxic empathy. We need more compassion, but that has to be led with, as the Bible says, wisdom and discernment. How do we do that? I want to go right to Dr. Carrie Gress. She is the author of Something Wicked: Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. Dr. Gress, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Good to talk to you. Where did this book come from? What are you seeing out there in our culture that made you alarmed?
Yeah, well, I've been writing about this for about 10 years, but I think that we have finally gotten to this critical point where people are realizing that something has gone desperately wrong with women, and we're just not making women like we used to. It's very hard to understand what a good woman is in the culture anymore. And so, we have to start looking at feminism. I think we've made efforts on the right to try to make feminism something good and productive and fruitful. And yet, we keep running into these brick walls in terms of women and the direction of women, the anger, the aggression, all of these kinds of elements. And so, I finally started researching really deeply into feminism and recognizing that this is, the root of so many of our problems, that we really can't make it into something good or even make it work with Christianity at this point.
Where do you start with the story of feminism?
Yeah. Well, I think feminism goes all the way back to the 1790s, actually, with Mary Wollstonecraft. She's considered the grandmother of it. But the real story is that Mary Wollstonecraft was deeply against the idea of Christ and Christianity, and that was really spread throughout the first wave. We've been told the story that all the suffragettes were these very pious Christian women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, but if you look closely, they all followed Wollstonecraft in this idea of Unitarianism instead of Trinitarianism. So they didn't actually believe in the divinity of Christ, and they actually thought that Christianity was a tool used by men to enslave women. So they were trying to get rid of it. And it very much grew up with socialism and communism, and then actually became fused with communism in the 1900s. So it's got this remarkable, very colorful past that I think most people don't know. And I cover a lot of that in the book. But it's really fascinating, and I think most importantly, we need to see that the roots of it were not Christian, and it comes from a totally different kind of DNA than what we find in Christianity.
Very interesting. Did the Unitarianism come first? Do you know what I'm saying? Did that inform these women's feminism, you think?
Well, absolutely. I think that the Unitarianism started. Mary Wollstonecraft was actually very much pro-French Revolution. She was, actually can be argued the first female leftist thinker, and so that was really played a role because she saw that any kind of male mediator was an obstacle to the potential of woman. And then after that, you see in the 1800s, all of these women, even if they started out as Baptist or Calvinist, they ended up becoming Unitarians and really throwing away the faith of their childhood and embracing this much more radical form that was really couched in the ideals of the Enlightenment and rationalism. So yeah, it comes from a totally different thread than Christianity.
Wow, what's the big? We can get a little theology here. Like, what is the fruit of the difference? So if you go down this Unitarian path, what's the fruit of that, and versus the fruit of the Trinitarian?
The Christian path. Yeah. So this is where it gets really interesting, because I think what we see feminism is it's an effort to be in control, and it's about power. Women were sold this idea that if we became more like men, we would be happier. But it's really about control. And one of the amazing things that I flesh out really in the book is this idea of the emotions, because in the 1890s, the socialists actually figured out that if you could make women mad, they were going to be a lot more politically active for you than if you have happy, healthy women. And so that's really the way in which feminism has been played out. And we can see this today, where women are being manipulated and told that it's better to be angry, contemptuous, or envious of others instead of really living out those Christian virtues of faith, hope, and love. So we've taken those virtues of faith, hope, and love and just supplanted them in the culture with this feminine set of vices that is actually distorting and destroying women, I think.
Wow. Okay. All right. I'm doing my best feminism. But how can you have faith, hope, and love when you're being kept down in the house, unhappy by a man, and you can't reach your full potential out in the world?
Yes, isn't that a great question? Well, that's a fascinating thing, is if you actually go back and look at the narrative, certainly women have always been vulnerable, and there have been bad men, and there have been ways that women have been abused. But I think this whole story really revolves around this idea that the home was bad and that motherhood is bad. And so if you look at even the last 50 years, it's very hard to find people saying anything good about motherhood. And yet if you see the problems in the culture, so many of them are because women have rejected their role as mothers. They've rejected the incredible gifts that we give to society by mothering others. And, I think motherhood isn't limited just to biological children, but also to caring for others, whether it's spiritually or psychologically. These are really important gifts that we can bring to the workplace or wherever it is that our life takes us. And that's really what has been, we've been, it's been traded in, is this lie that if we just act more like men, then we're really going to be fulfilled and happier. And the problem is most women figure that out well into their 40s and 50s when it's too late, because they've already traded in the family that they might have had for this goal of being autonomous through a career and the prestige and income that's supposed to come from that.
There's many examples of that. One of the most obvious ones would be the writer of the Sex and the City books, who went down that road, and she's older now and miserable, and talks about what a great regret it was that she never had a family, and now she has no one to take care of her and help her. I mean, like, come on, like.
No, and that's the real tragedy. Yeah, when you're young, I mean, I know this is what I was sold, was this idea of getting your degree, getting a great career, and really focusing on yourself. This kind of female autonomy. That's what we're sold as the highest good. And then from there, you can do whatever you want. But nobody tells us that the body has its own, keeps its own score, and there really is a clock that's ticking biologically, and we have to pay attention to that. And ultimately, women report that those are the things that become most important to them: are rich relationships, are the family that they build, is the community that they're able to create. And because we've abandoned that, I think this is why we see so much incredible loneliness and unhappiness and depression, anxiety. All of these things can really be traced back to women buying deeply into the lie that they're going to be better off if they mimic men.
What's a subtle decision that you see young women making that you're like, oh wait, that's off. That's not going to
Yeah,
go down
well,
a good road.
I think it really is this prioritization of work. And, you can see why it's appealing because when a woman is making decisions about her career, she's the one that's making those decisions. It's actually very hard to wait on a man to ask you out or ask you to marry him. There's this whole role of giving up your own control and your autonomy in that. And I think that's the real challenge is it's much easier to say, I'm in control of my life and this is the direction in which I want it to go. And if I get married, great. And if I don't, well, we'll deal with that later. But I think it really is this prioritization of work. And oftentimes it does come at the expense of relationships and getting married. And, women are really being pushed in this way. I know a lot of women are being told, you can freeze your eggs when you're in graduate school and then you can have kids later. Don't date. It's just going to distract you. And, this is a real tragedy because these opportunities are not, we know from the data, they're not the same when you get into your 30s, 40s, and 50s for sure.
What is your vision for your ideal Christian nationalist anti-woman America, Dr. Gress? What do you want instead?
Oh, goodness. I want something very simple. I just want people to stop trying to think that feminism is actually good for women. I think that this feminism has shielded itself incredibly successfully from any kind of public scrutiny because it says, as men, you're not supposed to question feminism or, if you do question it, you must not be pro-woman. You don't care about women. In my case, I get, berated for questioning it because I have a PhD. And I think all of it is just an incredible disservice to women and really keeps us from kind of looking behind the curtain and seeing, maybe these things are not working for women. So anyway, yeah, I think the answer is very simple. We just have to stop using feminism and considering ourselves as some kind of victimized by men, by default. I think these are very deeply Marxist categories that have really taken over the culture. And, the first step is really to stop using them, but also to start loving people closest to us instead of this, I'm going to change the world by doing something great and on a grand scale. I think women really have this incredible potential to change the world starting with a local level. And then if the bigger stuff comes, that's great. But we have to learn to love those closest to us. And we're uniquely equipped to do that with our bodies and just the incredible gifts that God has given us.
Uniquely equipped indeed. About a minute left. Where have you seen this feminist ideas infiltrate the church?
Oh, yeah, I think it's all over the place. I think there's been this effort, a lot of ways in which the occult has entered in the church. And then there's just also this effort to try to make John Paul II's work on women something compatible with feminism and even compatible with Mary Wollstonecraft, who was obviously not a deeply Christian woman and certainly not a friend of Catholicism. So I think we need to see the red flags there. And again, moving away from the language is going to do a lot to clarify what it is that we mean by patriarchy, what it is that we mean by good men and good women, and ultimately is going to lead back to real flourishing of family and faith.
Please go get the book by Dr. Carrie Gress, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. Dr. Gress, thank you for your courage and for putting this all down on paper for us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Grateful for you. Well done.